Welcome back to another week of skate class. This week I'm very excited to take a deeper dive into the world of screen printing with you guys. So I've brought in a whole bunch of items to share with you guys, original hand-drawn paper graphics. We're going to follow that on its journey from being a paper drawing to becoming a screen to eventually ending up on boards, t-shirts, or paper prints. So we're going to start off today with a little background on screen printing, then we're going to talk about setting up our image. We're going to explain how we burn the image onto the screen, and then of course we're going to do some printing today so you guys can see our designs in action. So the natural starting point for this week's lesson is looking at designs themselves. We're going to talk about what we want to print and how we're going to print it. So that really breaks down to the difference between positive and negative space in our image. Screen printing is essentially a more complex version of stencil making, and so what we're trying to do is block out areas we don't want ink, and we're going to leave the areas we do want the image open on our screen. So when I start off, I start in pencil or in pen, but the number one thing I'm thinking about is what color ink am I printing on what color garment. So we use a lot of dark colors here at the shop, black primarily, which means we're going to print in white ink. This means that our image is going to have to be rendered in reverse. We want the openings on our screen to be the white part of our image, whereas the rest of it is going to be the natural black from the shirt. So to illustrate that point here, I've got one of our shop logos. This is our Grit City Grindhouse Fortune and Glory back hit, and we can see it's white ink printed onto a black material. So when I start off with paper drawings, I draw the image the way I want it to end up looking. So we can see here I've put a little bit of a black background. I know what I want to be white. And then in the printing process, we're actually going to inverse this because, again, we want the openings on our screen to reference all of the white points in our graphics. So we can see here on our finished and burned screen, we can actually see light or objects behind the screen. The area that's more yellow is going to be the open mesh, and the area that's green has been clogged with a light-sensitive emulsion. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we actually did that, but for the purposes of this part of the lesson, just be thinking about what you want to transfer onto your garment or your paper, whether that's going to be a dark ink on a light surface or a light ink on a dark surface. That's going to be the number one thing for you to troubleshoot before we end up actually printing things. So for today's screen printing, we're going to be using this new and until now unreleased alchemy graphic that we designed for our fundraiser, which was unfortunately postponed due to the coronavirus. That being said, we're still having a lot of fun making limited edition gear with this to release here in the near future. What's really fun about screen printing is once you do the hard work of drawing your image, it takes under 2 seconds to actually apply that image to anything. So today we're going to print on a puzzle, we're going to print on some paper, and we'll even show you how we add this graphic onto skateboards. So screen printing is a very, very versatile form of adding images to pretty much anything. And so this image we are printing in a black ink on light toned surfaces, and we might even show you how we add a little bit of a glow in the dark after effect today. So let's go ahead and we're going to go check out the tools we need to screen print. I'm going to show you our wonderful screen printing setup, and then we're going to get to it. Before we jump into printing, we're going to take a minute to review the tools and supplies that we need and talk about why we use certain things over other products. So the first thing is we need an ink. We want to make sure we're using a fabric ink that's not going to wash out of our garments. We here at Alchemy like to use the Speedball water-based ink. It's a little bit more environmentally friendly. Plastisol is an industry standard. It's a very high oil-based ink, and essentially it's great for events or really, really long runs because it's never going to dry out in our screen. Whereas our water-based does have a working time. If we were to leave this ink coated on our screen for more than a couple hours, it's actually going to harden and kind of ruin our screen. So we do have to be aware of the limitations of our materials, but again, it's a little bit more environmentally friendly, and so that is why we choose to use it. Other than our ink, we are going to need a squeegee. This is going to be the tool we actually use to push that ink through the holes in our mesh. Funnily enough, squeegees come in different durometers, much like all of our bushings and wheels. A softer squeegee is going to be used for different applications depending on how fine the mesh on your screen is, how intricate your detail is, and again, personal preference. Lots of printers use multiple durometer squeegees. There's a ton of stuff out there. There's even companies that make handles for squeegees out of recycled skateboards. If you're one of those companies and you're watching this video, send us one. We'll happily use it. So Other than ink and our squeegees, we're going to want to use a spray adhesive. This is going to hold down our garment or our paper print or whatever we're printing on. It's going to keep it from sticking to our screen when we lift it up, so that's a very important piece of the procedure. And then, of course, paper towels, because accidents happen. Once you get a little bit of ink on your hand or somewhere, that ink tends to spread everywhere. So if you're printing, try to work as clean as possible. There's nothing worse than having a wonderful run of 100 shirts that you notice after the fact have a big black thumbprint on them. So work clean and you'll have less problems. Other than that, we have the rig itself. This is a very, very simple single color rig. You can see there's a magnet that holds this head up for us. This head is actually what we slot our screen into. And one of the key factors of screen printing is repetition. We want our prints to come out in the same place and in the same manner every time. So it's important that your gear that you're working with is able to hold things in place for you. After we put our screen on, we are going to attach our platen. And our platen is what we're going to stretch t-shirts over, what we're going to put our paper prints on. It's essentially the surface that we're printing onto. We've got a really, really simple platen here at the shop. It's a piece of wood with a bracket. And we're going to go ahead and slide that onto this arm. And once it's on, we want to tighten it up again. We don't want to see any wiggling in our platen because that's going to create inconsistencies in our prints. The last tool that we need to finish our prints is a flash heater. It is this little guy on wheels right here. So whenever we're done printing our garment, if we don't heat set that ink, it's going to rinse right out in the wash. So this is essentially the top half of an oven. It's going to generate a ton of heat right here at the bottom. We're going to roll it over this little rig with our shirt under it. We're going to heat cure the ink, and then we're going to roll it off. It's important that we don't leave any of our garments under there for too long because they will burn. In a lot of higher end print studios, almost all of this is automated. But the one step up from this would be a conveyor belt heater. So you're able to drop your garment. It's going to run through at a set speed with a set temperature to make sure you don't burn anything, but your image stays in the shirt. If we get a chance to visit our friend Bob from Shroom Brothers, he's got a wonderful setup that we'll take a look at that is vastly superior to what we work with here in the shop. All right, guys, as promised, we're going on a little field trip today. I am joined by Bob, the print guy Jewel, one half of the world-famous Shroom Brothers, and he graciously shares his home print studio with us, and so we're going to be doing some screen printing today.
Right on. Like Taylor said, I am Bob, the print guy Jewel, one half of Shroom Brothers. That sounded a bit parody, but that's the way it is. I want to talk about my space a little bit. And what I do. When I print shirts, I really feel that I'm putting a vibe through my body into these shirts to create something that people are proud to wear. And I think in doing that, I'm creating magic. And I think while I'm doing that, the magic permeates the space that I work in. The super secret shroom layer holds that magic, and it's ready to release it for other people like my friend Taylor here.
Let's take a look. Three, two, one, action. All right, step one, we got to take a look at what we've got to print. So I just had this order shipped a week ago, and it should be full of hoodies and button-ups. So we've got our garments, and the first thing I like to do is I prep. I double-check my inventory. I make sure that everything I paid for I received. And then I get everything laid out so it's nice and organized and easy for us to print. So we're going to get all of our hoodies laid out here on our clean table. And we've also got a nice run of button-up shirts to restock for the shop. So now I've got my inventory out. I'll go ahead and take a look at what's here, and then we're going to move along. All right, so we're going to give you a real quick tour of the shop if you can't see everything right now. We've got, obviously, our printing press right here. We've got 4 heads that we can load shirts on for easy production. We've got our screen holding rigs up here at top that also spin in case we're doing multicolor stuff. Once we've got our garments printed, it's really important, we're using water-based ink. We want to make sure that we get them heated to the right temperature so that the ink sets in the fabric. So Bob's got a wonderful conveyor belt heater right here, all of our knobs and buttons to set our temperature and our speed, and as we print things, we get to just lay them on this, let them run through the oven, and they drop out on the other side for us. Alright, so we've got our screen here. It is a tried and true favorite, the Grit City Grindhouse Parts and Services graphic, burned by Bob for us several years ago. This thing has weathered the test of time, and we are still using it. So we're going to go ahead and get it fed into our rig. One of the really important steps here in getting set up is making sure that our screen is centered. So you'll notice we have a wonderful center line on our platen, and we want to make sure that that line corresponds with the middle of our image so that all of our prints come out centered right where we want them. So once we get it lined up, we go ahead and tighten it down. Then we'll grab our squeegee, and we are ready to line up our garments and go ahead and start printing. Cool.
3, 2, 1, action.
Alright, so our screen is registered. We've got it centered on the platen. Before we start loading our garments, we want to make sure that we get a good dose of Easy Tack, Krylon, to make sure that our garment doesn't move at all during the printing process. So we're just going to give it a nice spritz down, make sure it's nice and tacky, and that way our hoodie is going to hold fast in the right placement. Because today we're printing white ink on black garments. We're going to do a 2-hit on it to make sure that that white ink is really popping for us. And so if the hoodie moves at all in between the printing, we're going to get a misalignment, we're going to get a double print, and we're going to lose valuable inventory. So we want to make sure that these things are nice and sticky for us. And right now what I'm doing is trying to find the center of the hoodie vertically to make sure that our Parts and Services logo is right where we want it. So I am a caveman, and I use my eyeballs and fingers to line things up. So the top of my graphic is sitting right here. We're about 3 fingers under the collar. I want to be at about a 4 finger. So we're going to slide this hoodie up just a little bit. So we've got the neckline right here at our second hatch mark. Double check right there. And we've got a nice 4-finger gapping. So our image is going to be printed right here in the middle of our hoodie, right where we want it. Alright, so we are now going to get our ink ready. There's a variety of inks used commercially. Plastisol is probably the industry standard for screen printing. It is an oil-based ink. It is great for doing huge runs. It never dries in the screen. But since we do small runs and we like our planet, we use a Speedball water-based ink. It's a little bit more environmentally friendly. It can be a little bit more temperamental, but for us and the size of our runs, it is worth it. So we're going to go ahead and get a healthy dose of ink here on our screen. And then one of the most important things about screen printing is called the flood stroke. So right now, our screen consists of small openings where we want our ink to be pushed through. And we don't want our ink to have to start on the top and work its way all the way through, so we do what's called a flood stroke. We take the ink, we gently pull it across the screen, and what that does for us is it sets the ink already in that mesh for us. So when I go to actually print, all I have to do is just push that ink through onto the garment. So let's go ahead and we're going to do our first print of the day. Flood stroke is in. We're going to do 1 pass. And then again, white ink on black garments, we want to give it a second pass so that we get a nice full print. And we can see lovely prints, just like that. Once we've printed it, we're going to grab by the shoulders, remove our hoodie, and then again, real important, before you send these out to anyone, we drop them on the conveyor belt heater here, and we're going to just send them all the way through this guy. And again, after we print, always flood. You can see right here, we've got open screen right there. That means that ink is very thin. It's going to dry out in between our press. So grab a little excess ink, move it around the screen, Make sure that that stays nice and wet during the print process so that we keep getting beautiful prints just like this guy. So one thing that's important is we want to get our temperature of the ink as it comes out of the press, and we want to make sure that we're hitting about 340, 350 degrees to make sure that that ink is properly set in there. And so we're getting plenty of heat on this guy. We are good to go. We're going to just start producing these things. Alright, so we just finished all the back hits on our shirts. We got all the front hits on our hoodies. So what we're going to do now is we're going to prep for doing our front hit on those button-up shirts. Alright, that's a wrap. We got our box of printed goods here. We've tidied up after ourselves, as you do when you're a guest in someone else's studio. We're getting ready to head out, but we just wanted to say thanks again to Bob. And if you guys want to learn more about Bob and his company or check out some of his goods, where can the people find information?
ShroomBrothers.com. Thanks for coming, Taylor.
Much appreciated,
Always
man.
enjoy, man.